and didn't even provide for that. And of course, there were some that mismanaged things. There were some rulers even back in the day that mismanaged things, and the food ran out. And then that's when the people got upset enough to overthrow them. And of course, rulers had to always be wary of other rulers trying to come in and take over. But other than that, there was no government assistance. No, the government didn't come in and pay your rent. The government didn't come in and give you food stamps simply because you weren't working or couldn't find a job. No, the government didn't provide for your retirement in any fashion. Now, a lot of times there was charity that helped the poor. The church, Catholic Church, in its better days, provided a lot of that type of assistance when the government didn't. So this notion of socialism and communism, these alternate types of governments, really didn't take hold and take form for various reasons until about approximately 200 years ago. In one of the countries, I might add, that ignited this alternative thought in governance is the United States. We were considered an experiment, and a lot of times you hear people, refer to the United States as that democratic experiment. This country is a democratic experiment. I think, at 230 plus years of being a nation with the same constitution and not having a single coup, but every single time having peaceful transfers of power, even in a time of war, you can't say it's an experiment anymore. It's been a success. And it has spawned various types of democracies around the planet over the years. But you still have things like socialism that came up, which is, let me be totally frank with you on this. Socialism is nothing more than a form, it's communism light. That's all it is. It's communism light. And of course, we have communism. We have their various forms. We still have dictators around the world. But this notion that government should take care of you is a relatively new thought in human history. And the reason is yes, we've moved into this industrial revolution. And so we're no longer like we were all throughout history. But I might add that, there were some great advanced civilizations back in the ancient day. And Rome is a prime example of that, but even before Rome. But there is all of this notion that, government should take care of people. No, that's new. That is partly due to the rise of our modern society and the Industrial Revolution, because then everyday people, paupers, if you will, began to be able to move up and change their station in life relatively easily. So you had the Industrial Revolution that came along, and people decided, well, we don't want to be poor and be subsistent anymore, so we're going to move to these great cities that are starting to form, or that were already in existence, in the old world, and we're going to go to work for somebody. And now, that is, working for somebody else is not new, but the whole notion that an employer all of a sudden had multiple employees instead of just a few was also something new. And these people, some of them were very benevolent and kind, and some of them were not so very benevolent and not so kind. But it gave rise to something new that the world had not been familiar with, and we call that today the middle class. People who did not have to work 12 hours a day just so they could survive. Instead, 12, 14, 16 hours a day just so they could survive. People who did not have to necessarily have, a vast storage of foodstuffs to last them through the winter or through the non-growing season. No, they were able to trade their hours and their labor for a wage. That wage paid them more than enough for them to, quote unquote, live. Now they were able to afford things beyond food and shelter, beyond survival. It got to the point where they were able to be able to afford what would be considered luxury items. Today we we take them for granted. A car was once a luxury item. Now it's pretty much a necessity. But the vast majority of Americans can afford a car. Maybe they can't all afford a new car, but the vast majority of Americans, even those on welfare, can afford a car. And as technology advances and we got more technological items that we could have, like refrigerators and TVs, the middle class could relatively easily afford it. Again, something that did not happen or exist before the Industrial Revolution and before the advent of the middle class. Now, granted, and I'm going to give credit where credit is due, unions in the early days had a very big influence on the rise of the middle class. They did. Unions have really, in most cases, outlived their usefulness, and I can have a whole discussion about unions today. But all of this notion, even up until recently, unions didn't think that somebody else should take care of them. Sure, they instituted the system called the pension because that was retirement. And that was a notion that people, if they're going to work for somebody else, they weren't able to put something away for themselves. And of course, they weren't having, relatively large families. No, you got the Duggars are just Duggars or Duggars, whoever they are. They're an anomaly in today's society. I mean, the average household has 2 children today or less. And that's what we call the nuclear family. And that's pretty much in any industrialized nation. It's about 2 kids. So there's no more, the general rule is no more families having 6, 8, 10 children. It's 2, 3, or 4, most likely 2. And in some countries like China, it's by law 1. Well, they needed a way to be able to take care of themselves in retirement, so this pension thing. And then of course, as time progressed, we got to doing things of, mandating our own retirement. Social Security was never meant to be a retirement plan. It was meant to be a government assistance plan in your old age. A lot of people don't realize that today. They think the government should, it's my money. No, it's not. It's a tax, not an account. And you have to understand that. It's not an account. But it is a tax. And as we continue to progress, we have this notion that, okay, government now should take care of us. But the problem with that is that in order for government to take care of its people, it has to first, because it has to give to the people. And that hasn't changed at all, how government gets its money, how government gets its wealth, how government is able to give back to its people in any form or fashion. Even back in the day, in ancient Egypt, ancient Rome, when they had to put foodstuffs away for droughts and famines and things like that, they had to take it from those who produced it in order to save it. So in other words, even back in the day, if there was a tax, like say wheat, a farmer may have been able to produce 10 bushels of wheat, but the government says, well, we need to save some of this for a rainy day or a famine, actually. So we're going to take a bushel or two. It's the same thing today. So they had to take out of the economy, out of the private sector. It's the same thing today. They have to take the money out of the economy, out of the private sector. Now, you can say, well, a lot of times what they would do is they would go and attack somebody else, Rod, and get all that treasure. No. Yeah, there was treasure that they could take, but that's not how they ran their everyday operations. Even in old, wonderful, glamorous Camelot, there were taxes on the people. Because if you're trying to build a peaceful kingdom where you don't go to war and you're not trying to conquer other kings, then where are you getting your treasure? How are you able to run the government? How are the kings and queens able to get rich and stay rich and build castles and all that kind of stuff and pay for the military? That was the only thing that they provided government anyway back then, was military. Well, they had to take it from the people. Communism took more from the people. Socialism, a little bit less. Capitalism, a lot less. That allowed some people who had the ideas and who put them into actual physical being to become extremely wealthy. That still happens today. But now, because we want to have this government take care of us notion from the liberal class, we're seeing the shrinkage for the first time since it was birthed, the shrinkage of the middle class. Now, the world economy doesn't run on government, doesn't run on the poor. The world's economy in every industrialized nation runs solely on the middle class. Now, the bigger and more successful your middle class, the greater your country and your country's economy. China finally got that and started to adopt capitalistic measures. Now, make no mistake about it, they're still a fully communist state. But they understand that if they want to have a powerful nation today, they have to have a middle class. The only way to have a middle class is through capitalism, not socialism. Capitalism. That is what's going to start, build, grow, and strengthen your middle class. Every nation that has adopted a socialistic type of government where the government decides it's going to take care of people financially, we're seeing them decline and degrade. The United States is entering that. We already saw it in Europe. Europe has been on a decline for decades, ever since World War II. And you can't say, well, they didn't fully recover. Yeah, they could have recovered, but too many European nations after World War II adopted socialism, including England. And we can see the devastation it caused there. England, rather quickly after World War II, lost the position of having the world's currency. The United States is quickly approaching that right now. If we were to ever lose that ability to be the world's currency, our economy would completely collapse. Because socialism doesn't work either, folks. The only thing that gives people a choice and empowers people to better themselves as well as their community and their society is capitalism. We can look at history and see that is true. Don't doubt me, folks. Look it up.